it came out a while ago. Ducati kind of like let it out that it was like, oh, really the big difference between the 24 and the 25 is the ride height device and the swing arm.
I know that's what they say.
I think that's what they want us to believe. I don't believe that that's the only thing. I think it was different, but I don't think that's the only thing.
Right.
Because they could absolutely, if that's all it was, you could have switched 3 rounds in.
And then you would have had Marc Marquez and Pecco both riding extremely well.
Yeah, so it can't be that. I'm convinced at this point it is definitely the engine because that's the one thing they can't change. But specifically, I don't think it's the engine mount locations because that's the other thing is like if they move the motor mounts, then the frame has to accommodate that. So you couldn't just swap frames and whatnot. I don't think it was the frame. I think it was the crankshaft inertia. My guess is, so with these V4s, what's interesting in MotoGP, with the V4s, they basically have an external flywheel that they can adjust the amount of inertia the engine has. But like most things, all I can do is add weight to it. I can't, if it's too heavy already, I can't somehow take weight
Do they start
off.
off with light ones and then...
Well, so you would think that you'd start off with an engine with a crank that's as light as you can get away with, and then you will modify the crankshaft inertia with these external flywheel systems that they have. And they're fairly secretive. I've never actually seen pictures of it. I've read and seen stuff about them for years. But my guess is when they went to the 25 engine, they maybe went to slightly bigger journals, slightly bigger bottom end bearings, something about it to make it a little more stout, to make more power, because they all said that 25 makes more power. But it might have changed the inertia so much that they couldn't get it light enough to give them the engine braking feel.
Oh, really? Lighter would... So it had too much engine braking if it's heavy? If it's too heavy?
It's kind of a confusing thing. So, and somebody in the comments can absolutely argue with me on this one because I may not get this one totally right. So when the crankshaft is too heavy... Oh, so imagine that you have a bike where the crankshaft is really, really light.
All right, going back to old two-strokes or dirt bikes and stuff like
where
that.
As soon as you close the gas, the revs just drop.
Right, and the bike almost feels like it accelerates because...
Yeah, like there's just no flywheel inertia at all. And so when you go to the brakes, as soon as you let off the gas, the revs want to drop. You can sometimes get lots of engine braking and the rear kind of like slides and bucks and moves around a lot. If you have a ton of inertia in the engine, a ton of crankshaft inertia, when you rev, the revs will feel like they kind of hang and they don't want to drop very quickly.
Oh, okay.
So you don't get much engine braking help.
All right, so what I'm doing is I'm confusing like a big torquey V-twin, which might have more compression and mass, with flywheel inertia.
Exactly.
So that's where I'm confused.
Yeah, so now if you have a lot of inertia and the revs don't drop quickly, they'll kind of hold up slower. You'll get less engine braking out of it in theory because the revs didn't just drop. They don't want to drop so quickly. But it's this balancing act because it's like if the inertia is too high, it won't want to drop. But if it's too low and it wants to drop really quickly, then they have to do a bunch of additional systems to try to keep the thing spinning and not just lock and slide.
Gotcha.
And so you're trying to like band-aid the issue with electronics and other things. Like one of the great examples of this was Peter Bom talked about this just recently. Back in 2009 in World Superbike, when Ben Spies came over, Peter Bom was the mechanic on the World Supersport team in Yamaha.
Oh, wow.
So he's very close. He was close to the whole thing. When they first came in with that cross-plane crankshaft R1 for Ben, they got the crankshaft inertia wrong. But when they came in order to help him on corner entry, they were having the butterflies open. So basically the throttle was opening 18%.
18%?
On entry.
That's a lot.
To try to help him keep the rear wheel in line so he could actually brake and turn the bike. So that's kind of a tangential story, but it's really just they have to do a bunch of these Band-Aid electronic systems to try to keep the thing working correctly, like, slipper clutch, things like that, throttles, like all these things, if it wants to drop the revs too quickly. So my guess, though, is they went with too heavy of a crankshaft. It didn't want to drop the revs as quick as they wanted. And there's not a lot of systems you can do that mimic.
Compensate that. So a lot of the problems we saw with Pecco where he was overdriving corner entrances effectively, right? Because the bike wasn't slowing down the way he wanted it to. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. So, I think that's a very plausible argument.
And where I think Marc Marquez can get away with it is, as good as he is on the front end, I would argue he's probably just as much of a genius with the rear brake. I think they've always talked about he uses a way bigger rear brake, a much more beefy caliper and all this stuff to deal with how much he uses it. My guess is he was like, don't worry about it, I'll handle it. Like, I'll use the rear brake to basically get...
He's doing things that nobody else can do.
Yeah.